Hi there, Year 2 children. It's Mr Yeardsley. Going to continue reading our book, The Hodgeheg. If you remembered what had happened so far, Max had had a second bang on the head. We're up to chapter 6. Meanwhile, back at number 5A, Pa had had a bonanza. Sneaking next door and finding a full saucer of dog food and no sign of his neighbour, he'd scoffed the lot. He came staggering back, very full of himself and munchy meat, and fell into a deep, bloated sleep. Ma woke him just before dawn. "Pa," she said, "wake up! Max hasn't come back." Pa opened his eyes and saw her worried face and the three smaller but equally worried faces of Peony, Pansy and Petunia. "He's been gone all night," said Ma. "Oh, Pa, do you think something's happened to him?" There they are, all looking worried. Pa got to his feet. "I don't know," he said, "but don't fret, Ma, I'll find him." "But he could be anywhere. How are you going to know where to look?" Before Pa could answer, he heard a strange voice coming from the hedge that divided 5A and 5B. "Excuse me," said the strange voice, and out poked the head of their neighbour. Pa bristled, his spine standing on end. "It's that munchy meat," he thought. "He's found his empty saucer and he's going to cut up rough about it. Well, I can play rough too. I don't like the look of him anyway, and if he wants to fight, he can have one. We'll soon see who's the better hog." But before he could think of anything to say, the hedgehog from 5B came out of the hedge and said again, "Excuse me." "Well," said Pa, "I couldn't help overhearing what you were saying." "Family matter," growled Pa. "Exactly. You're worried about your little lad." "Oh," cried Ma, "have you seen him?" "Yes, I have. At least, I met a young chap in the park who said he was lost and looking for the way back to 5A. Unless, of course, it was a 5A in some other street." "Did you notice anything different about him?" asked Ma quickly. The neighbour looked a trifle embarrassed. "Well, yes," he said. "Now that you mention it, he seemed to be having a little bit of difficulty with his speech. Muddled some of his words now and then, like Hodgeheg." "Yes, that's our Max," cried Ma. "Was he all right?" asked Pa. "Not hurt or anything?" There they are having a chat. "No, he was fine. I told him the best way to go home. He'll be along soon, I'm sure. Try not to worry." Pa cleared his throat awkwardly. His neighbour's kindness greatly added to his feeling of guilt. "It's very decent of you," he said. "Glad to help. That's what neighbours are for." "Can we offer you something?" said Ma. "Some bread and milk?" "Oh, no thanks," said the neighbour. "I had a pretty good night's hunting in the park. Just as well, because when I got home I found that someone had eaten all my munchy meat." He looked directly at Pa and his eyes were twinkling. "It was a cat, I expect," he said, and back through the hedge he went. "Wasn't that nice of him?" said Ma, and Peony, Pansy and Petunia chanted, "Nice, nice, nice." Pa grunted. A part of him thought that he should confess his sin to his neighbour. But then another part of him, for he was very worldly wise, thought that least said was soonest mended. Life was full enough of headaches without inviting any extra ones. The same thought occurred to Max when at last he came to his senses. The door of the telephone booth had knocked him out cold, and the neighbour from 5B had not noticed the still small figure as he'd hurried out across the road, deserted before the morning rush hour began. "Oh," thought Max, "has any hedgehog ever had a more terrible headache? The last bang I got made me talk a bit funny, and I expect this one's made me things even worse. I'd better try saying something." "Oh," said Max, "has any hedgehog ever had a more horrible headache?" Max considered this. It sounded fine. Suddenly he felt fine. Even the ache already felt much less. "My name," he said softly, "is Victor Maximilian St. George, and," he said more loudly, "I have 3 sisters called Peony, Pansy and Petunia, and I live with Pa and Ma at number 5A, and," he shouted at the top of his voice, "I am a very lucky hedgehog." Without thinking, without listening, without a single glance to the left or right, he dashed across the street, straight in front of the first of that morning vehicles, the milk van. The noise that followed was enough to wake the whole street. First there was a screech as the milkman braked and swerved. Then came the shattering sound of dozens and dozens of bottles smashing. Lastly came the sound of the milkman's voice cursing every hedgehog ever born as he danced with rage in a sea of gold-top, silver-top, semi-skimmed and skimmed, of orange squash and grapefruit juice and fresh farm eggs. Ma and Pa had sent the girls to bed and were waiting up in the growing light of dawn. They were crouching side by side, listening, when suddenly the dreadful racket burst upon their ears. There's the milkman. All those things crashed about. Shows how old this book is, that there was a milkman. Sounds like something's got run over, said Pa heavily. Brace yourself, old lady. It could be our Max. Ma buried her head and rolled herself into a ball of misery. At that moment they heard a cheery voice. Now, it said, what's all the fuss about? There's no point in crying over spilt milk. Chapter 7. What a happy scene of grunting, snuffling, squeaking joy there was in the garden of 5A as the girls were woken to be told the good news. And what a jolly crunching of snails there was at the family celebrated with a feast. After it all, Max slept heavily, and by evening, when he reappeared, the neighbour had come through the hedge twice, once to inquire if Max was back, and again to ask if he was quite well. At first, Ma and Pa felt a little uncomfortable at these visits. Ma because she knew what Pa had done, Pa because he knew that the neighbour knew, but the matter was not mentioned. They had been wrong, they found, in supposing that a family of hedgehogs lived next door. The neighbour had never married, and as elderly bachelors often are, he was rather lonely and very fond of children. Already he'd invited Peony, Pansy and Petunia to come and play in his garden whenever they liked, and seeing that they were not sure how to address him, had asked them to call him Uncle. Uncle what? They said. The neighbour scratched his head thoughtfully with a hind foot. Let's see now, he said. I live in garden of number 5B. How about Uncle B? After dark, the family were worm hunting in the lawn when they heard a rustling in the dividing hedge, and the three girls ran towards it crying, Uncle B! Uncle B! Uncle B! There they are. Who's Uncle B? Asked Max. Our next door neighbour, said Ma. That's what the girls call him. They've been playing in his garden. But, Pa, said Max, I thought you couldn't stick him. Pa was saved from replying by the approach of Uncle B, and now Max recognised him. Oh, hello, sir, he said politely. You're the gentle hog I met in the park. Thank you very much for your help. Don't mention it, Max, said Uncle B. Glad to hear from your parents that you're, totally recovered. You should stay in the garden, son, said Pa. You're safe in here. Max considered this. He'd no intention of giving up his research. The neighbour had helped him once. Maybe he could do so again. As if reading his thoughts, Uncle B said, Well, I must be running along now. Any time you feel like having a chat, Max, you just pop over. The next night, Max did pop over. Hello, young fellow, said Uncle B. Have some munchy meat. They always give me more than I can manage. No, thanks. It's your advice I need, said Max, getting straight to the point. Shoot, said Uncle B. He listened carefully while Max told him everything that had happened so far in his efforts to find a safe hedgehog crossing. I must say, he said when Max had finished, I admire your spirit and your ambition. Finding a really safe way to cross the roads would be beneficial to the whole of hedgehog kind. But the two methods that humans use don't seem to be suitable for us. There's Uncle B, sharing his munchy meat. No better, it appears from your experiences, than the old time-honoured way. Look right, look left, look right again, before going across. One thing strikes me, however, Uncle B paused. What's that, Uncle B? All your research so far has been at night time, because hedgehogs are nocturnal, but humans aren't. They don't see at all well at night, which is why they keep on clobbering us. Now, if you could only find a place to cross in broad daylight, then at least they could see us coming. It might pay us to change our habits. Better to lose your sleep than your life, that's what I say. Well, said Max, I suppose that's either of the two ways I've tried would work in daylight too. Trouble is, with either of them, you've got to get across so quickly. Now, if only there was a human who could stop the traffic and make absolutely sure it didn't move till you were safely over. There are humans like that, said Uncle B. I saw one once when I was out during the day. Not something I often do. He was a big man, dressed in blue, with a tall domed hat on his head. He just held up his hand and everything stopped whilst some small humans crossed the road. Can you see what it is? Once they were safely on the other side, he waved the traffic on again. Max pondered this. So, he said, there might be lots and lots of small humans who have to cross the street by day. Uncle B nodded. And the big humans, Max continued, would worry about the small ones getting across safely? Oh yes, just like hedgehogs. So there simply must be a special, perfectly safe daytime crossing place for small humans. Now where on earth could that be? You tell me, Max. You tell me, said Uncle B. I will, said Max. I will. There we go, up to chapter 8. I wonder where small humans cross the road most days. Maybe twice a day. Have a little think about that. Be interested to know your thoughts. Thank you for working so hard at home, boys and girls. Thank you for the pictures I've already had for our virtual VE Day parade. Please send some more into the inquiry address at school. By tomorrow, we could do with 1 or 2 more, just to make sure everything is extra special for our assembly on Thursday. In the meantime, remember, if you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours. Keep smiling, folks.